What if the next coin you spend is worth more than the money in your wallet? That sounds impossible, but people accidentally lose valuable old coins every single day without realizing it. So check your pocket now, check that change jar, and listen carefully. Do not spend these coins until you know what you're holding. Nobody talks about this hidden wealth, this silent fortune hiding in plain sight. Collectors are fighting for the right coins, and real auction shock can happen when one finally appears. Stay with me, because each coin gets rarer, more shocking, and more valuable, and the last one could change everything. Imagine finding a Washington quarter that looks completely ordinary at first glance. No dramatic error. No spectacular mistake screaming for attention. Just a 1970 quarter with no mint mark. And that is exactly what makes this one so fascinating. Most people would glance at it, see an old quarter, and move on. But collectors can see something completely different. A piece of American history with the potential to command serious money when the right example survives in the right condition. The year 1970 was not an ordinary moment in America. The country was dealing with enormous economic and political pressure, including rising prices, a changing industrial landscape, and the continuing Vietnam War. Everyday Americans were feeling the pressure in their wallets, while the U.S. Mint was producing enormous quantities of circulating coins to keep commerce moving. That production environment matters, because when millions of coins are struck under pressure, tiny differences in quality, surfaces, and survival can become incredibly important decades later. Now look closely at the front. The obverse features George Washington facing left, surrounded by the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," with the date 1970 positioned below his portrait. And here is where your attention needs to sharpen. There is no mint mark. For a 1970 Washington quarter, that absence points to Philadelphia production. On the reverse, you'll see the American eagle with wings spread wide, surrounded by United States of America, E pluribus unum, quarter dollar, and the denomination wording. Every letter, every edge, and every tiny surface detail deserves a second look. This quarter also carries the physical identity of the modern clad era. A standard 1970 Washington quarter weighs about 5.67 grams, measures approximately 24.3 millimeters across, and is about 1.75 millimeters thick. Its edge is reeded, and the coin uses a copper-nickel outer layer bonded to a copper core. Run your finger around that edge and you can feel the ridges that have survived more than half a century of handling. The specifications sound ordinary, but remember, ordinary coins can become extraordinary when collectors compete for surviving examples. And there is another trap here. Age alone does not create a fortune. What collectors obsess over is preservation. A quarter that spent decades being thrown into cash drawers, dropped on sidewalks, rattled around in machines, and carried in pockets can lose the surface quality collectors desperately want. Original condition matters. Original toning can matter. Even natural darkness and antique-looking coloration can tell a story about how the coin survived. That is why you should never scrub away that old appearance just because you think you are making the coin look better. Never clean this coin. A polished or chemically cleaned surface can permanently destroy the originality collector's value. What looks like harmless cleaning to you can look like irreversible damage to a serious buyer. Examine the date. Confirm the missing mint mark. Inspect the lettering. Study Washington's portrait. And check the fields under good lighting. Do not scratch it. Rub it with a cloth, or test it with chemicals. If something about the coin looks unusually promising, professional grading is critical because authentication and condition can dramatically affect collector confidence. Now comes the part that makes people stop scrolling. The market figure provided for this 1970 no mint mark Washington quarter in fine condition is approximately $122,000 at today's auction market level. That is not something you should assume every 1970 quarter is worth. It is the stated market value for the specific coin profile we are discussing. And that distinction is everything. The value of a collectible coin depends heavily on the exact piece, its authenticity, condition, preservation, and what serious buyers are willing to pay. So why would collectors emotionally chase a coin like this? Because supply changes forever. Coins disappear into collections. Others are damaged, cleaned, melted, lost, or simply forgotten. Meanwhile, collectors continue searching for old American coins with the right combination of date, mint mark status, condition, and originality. When several determined buyers want the same coin, the atmosphere can change quickly. Bidding becomes quieter, more aggressive, and intensely competitive. One collector stops bidding, another refuses to let it go, and suddenly, an ordinary-looking quarter becomes the center of attention. Most people miss this. Patience can be more valuable than excitement. If you discover a potentially important coin, do not rush to sell it to the first person who shows interest. Do not clean it. Do not let someone casually damage the surface while trying to inspect it. Protect it properly and consider professional grading. Collectors understand that surviving original examples become harder to find as time passes. Demand can rise while available examples shrink, and that is exactly the kind of pressure that can turn a forgotten coin into hidden wealth. Think about that for a second. More than 50 years ago, someone could have received this quarter in ordinary change and spent it without a second thought. Maybe it bought a small item. Maybe it disappeared into a cash register. Maybe it sat in a drawer for decades. And today, the right example can represent a silent fortune. That is why these coins are dangerous to ignore. You are not just looking at 25 cents. You could be looking at a piece of American history that collectors are willing to fight over. So if you find a 1970 Washington quarter with no mint mark, slow down. Check the date first. Check the missing mint mark. Examine the surfaces. Look for original toning rather than trying to make the coin shine. Remember the weight of about 5.67 grams, the 24.3 millimeter diameter, the reeded edge, and the clad construction. Most importantly, remember this. Do not spend this coin until you know what you have. Professional grading can be critical when the stakes are high, and this is only coin number 1. What comes next is even bigger. The next coin has the kind of story that can make collectors completely change the way they look at pocket change. It is rarer, more shocking, and even more dangerous to ignore. So before you spend another old coin, stay close because the next discovery could make this quarter look like the beginning of the story, not the end. There's a reason old pennies can be dangerous to ignore. They are so easy to dismiss. You see a brown coin, notice the date, and toss it back into circulation. But what if that tiny piece of copper-colored history has been sitting unnoticed for decades? This is a 1944 wheat penny with no mint mark, and most people would never stop to investigate it. That could be the mistake that costs them a hidden treasure. The year 1944 puts this penny directly into one of the most dramatic periods in American history. The United States was still deep in World War II. American factories were producing for the war effort, and millions of people were living under enormous economic pressure. Every resource mattered. Every factory mattered. And the U.S. Mint was producing coins needed for everyday commerce, while the nation was focused on winning a global war. This penny was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which is why there is no mint mark beneath the date. That missing letter is not automatically an error, it is part of the coin's normal identity. And that is exactly why you have to slow down. Collectors don't simply look for something unusual. They study dates, mint marks, surfaces, preservation, and the tiny details that separate an interesting old coin from an important collectible. Turn the coin over and you get the classic wheat penny design. On the front is Abraham Lincoln facing right, with liberty beside his portrait, and in God we trust across the upper portion. The date 1944 appears below. On the reverse are 2 wheat ears framing the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, 1 cent, and 1 cent's denomination placement within the classic wheat stock design. Every letter belongs to its story. This is a small coin, but it carries a surprising amount of history. A standard 1944 Lincoln wheat cent weighs approximately 2.7 grams, measures about 19 millimeters in diameter, and is roughly 1.5 millimeters thick. Its edge is plain, The composition is primarily bronze, traditionally about 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. That familiar reddish-brown metal is part of what gives an old wheat penny its unmistakable character. But here is where the story becomes more interesting. A coin made for ordinary spending was never intended to become a prized historical object. Millions entered circulation, passed through countless hands, disappeared into drawers, jars, cash registers, and pockets, and eventually became damaged or lost. More than 80 years later, survival in attractive original condition becomes increasingly important. The coin may look ordinary, but its journey through time is anything but ordinary. And if your 1944 penny has a dark, brown, or uneven antique surface, don't immediately assume something is wrong. Natural toning and original surfaces can tell collectors that the coin has aged without being aggressively altered. Never clean it. Do not polish it, scrape it, soak it, or try to make it shine. Cleaning can leave permanent marks and destroy the original surface collectors want. Sometimes the ugliest looking old coin is the one you should investigate most carefully. Now inspect the details that most people overlook. Start with the date and confirm that it really reads 1944. Then check directly beneath the date for the absence of a mint mark. Study Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the wheat stalks, and the open fields for scratches or unusual damage. Don't assume that every 1944 penny is valuable simply because it is old. The exact condition and originality matter enormously, and professional grading can become critical when a coin appears promising. This is where collector psychology takes over. Some collectors want a coin because it completes a date set. Others want a well-preserved example from an important historical period. And some become obsessed with owning original coins that survived from America's wartime years. As desirable examples are placed into collections, they stop circulating. Supply naturally shrinks. Meanwhile, collectors continue searching. That combination can create intense competition when the right coin finally appears. For the specific 1944 no mint mark wheat penny described in this video, in circulated condition, the provided current market value is $117,000. Treat that figure as the stated market value for this specific coin profile, not as a claim that every circulated 1944 penny is worth anywhere near that amount. The real value of any individual coin depends on authentication, exact condition, originality, and the actual market response when serious buyers compete. And that distinction could save you from making a huge mistake. If you discover a 1944 wheat penny, don't immediately assume you found a fortune, but don't automatically spend it either. Protect it, examine it carefully, and avoid anything that could damage the surface. If the coin appears unusually well preserved or has characteristics that deserve expert attention, professional grading is one of the safest ways to establish its condition and authenticity. Think about how easily this treasure could disappear. Someone receives the penny as change. They see a brown 1-cent coin. They throw it into a jar, spend it at a store, or leave it forgotten beneath other coins. Decades pass. Nobody notices. That is the real danger with old coins. Their appearance can be completely disconnected from their potential collector importance. Hidden wealth doesn't always arrive looking valuable. Sometimes it arrives looking like the least important coin in your pocket. So remember what to check. 1944 date, no mint mark. Original surface, Lincoln's portrait, the wheat reverse, and overall condition. Remember the approximately 2.7 grams weight, 19 mm diameter, 1.5 mm thickness, and plain edge. Most importantly, never clean it and never rush. Patience creates opportunities because once an original surface is damaged, you cannot simply put it back. Do not spend this coin until you know what you're holding. A circulated 1944 wheat penny can look completely ordinary while carrying a story from America's wartime past. And for the specific example we're discussing, the stated market figure reaches serious money. That's why collectors keep searching, why old pennies continue disappearing into private collections, and why one forgotten coin can become a silent fortune hiding in plain sight. But don't get comfortable yet. This was only coin number 2, and the next coin takes the hunt in a completely different direction. The next discovery is the kind of coin that can make you stare at your change twice before spending it. If you think this wheat penny was dangerous to overlook, stay with me because what comes next could be even harder to ignore. Most people have a blind spot when they search their change. They look at pennies, maybe silver dimes, and then completely ignore the nickel. That could be a costly habit, because sitting quietly among ordinary 5-cent pieces is a coin from 1946 that carries the story of post-war America. A 1946 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark can look almost boring at first glance, but collectors know that old coins can hide their importance beneath an ordinary surface. The year 1946 was a turning point. World War II had finally ended. American soldiers were coming home. Factories were shifting from wartime production back toward civilian life, and the nation was trying to rebuild everyday normalcy. The U.S. Mint was also moving through a major transition. The special wartime composition used for Jefferson nickels was ending, and the traditional nickel composition returned. That makes 1946 an especially interesting date for anyone who studies the series. Now look at the front. Thomas Jefferson faces left, with the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" appearing around his portrait, along with the date 1946. On a Philadelphia minted example, there is no mint mark. Turn it over, and you see Monticello, the famous Virginia home associated with Jefferson, centered prominently on the reverse. Around it are United States of America, E pluribus unum, 5 cents, and Monticello. Even the small lettering deserves attention because decades of circulation can soften those details. And there is something fascinating about holding one of these coins. A standard 1946 Jefferson nickel weighs about 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters across, and is roughly 1.95 millimeters thick. Its edge is plain, not reeded. The regular 1946 composition returned to the traditional copper-nickel alloy, approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. So when you hold one, you're holding a small piece of the post-war transition that followed one of the most important events in American history. But don't make the mistake of thinking that every 1946 nickel is automatically rare. That's not how collecting works. This is a standard issue coin, not an error or a special mint mistake. Its appeal comes from its age, historical context, condition, originality, and collector demand. The missing mint mark identifies Philadelphia production, and that tiny blank space beneath the date can become one of the first things a collector checks when examining a potential example. Here's where things get serious. Fine condition means the coin has experienced circulation, so you should expect visible wear. Jefferson's hair and facial details may be softened, and the high points of Monticello can show wear as well. But originality still matters. An old nickel with natural toning, dark areas, or an antique surface should never be aggressively cleaned just because it doesn't look bright. Never clean this coin. A polished surface can permanently reduce collector appeal and destroy the evidence of how the coin naturally aged. Instead, examine it gently. Start with the date. Then check for the missing mint mark. Look closely at Jefferson's portrait, the lettering, Monticello, the steps and surrounding fields, and the overall surface. You're looking for originality rather than trying to manufacture beauty. Professional grading becomes critical when the coin appears particularly strong, because an independent assessment can establish condition and give serious collectors greater confidence. And this is exactly why old nickels can become hidden treasure. Millions were made for everyday commerce. People didn't put them into protective holders because nobody expected a 5-cent piece to become an object of intense collector interest decades later. They were spent, dropped, scratched, carried in pockets, and forgotten in drawers. Some disappeared completely. Others survived, but not all survived with the same surfaces. Every original example that remains becomes part of a shrinking pool. Collectors can become surprisingly emotional about coins like this. It's not just the denomination. It's the connection to a specific moment in American history, A 1946 Jefferson nickel represents the beginning of a new post-war era. For someone building a complete Jefferson nickel collection, the right example fills a meaningful place in the story. And when collectors are searching for the same desirable pieces, the competition can become very real. One buyer backs away, another keeps bidding, and suddenly that little nickel becomes the center of attention. For the specific 1946 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel we're discussing, in fine condition, the provided current market value is $119,000. That figure applies to the specific coin profile supplied for this video. It does not mean every 1946 Philadelphia nickel is automatically worth $119,000. Actual collectible value depends on the individual coin, its authentication, condition, originality, and what buyers are willing to pay in the market. So if you discover a 1946 nickel, don't panic and don't spend it blindly. Look at the date. Look for the missing mint mark. Examine the surfaces and details without touching them unnecessarily. Never polish it. Never use chemicals. Never scrape away dark toning. If the coin appears promising, professional grading can be one of the most important steps you take. Patience matters because once you damage an original surface, you can't simply restore it to its natural state. Think about the possibility sitting in front of you. A coin that once bought something for 5 cents could now represent serious money in the right circumstances. That's the strange beauty of American coin collecting. Hidden wealth doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it is a worn nickel sitting unnoticed at the bottom of a change jar. Someone else may see 5 cents. A serious collector may see history, scarcity, and an opportunity worth investigating. This detail changes everything. Don't judge the coin by its denomination. Judge it by its story, date, mint mark status, condition, and originality. The 1946 Jefferson nickel came from a nation stepping out of wartime and into a completely different era. Today, the surviving examples are more than pocket change. For the specific coin described here, the stated market figure reaches $119,000, and that is exactly why you should slow down before spending an old nickel. Do not spend this coin until you know what you're holding. Check it carefully. Protect the original surface. And remember that professional grading can be critical, because the moment you realize what you've been casually carrying around, you may never look at a nickel the same way again. And we're not finished. Coin number 4 is waiting. And this next one could be even more shocking. It has another story, another set of details collectors obsess over, and another reason you should start looking twice before every coin leaves your hand. Stay till the end because the final discovery could be the one you absolutely do not want to spend. There is something almost unfair about this coin. It is small, familiar, and easy to overlook, and that is exactly how valuable history can disappear. Imagine reaching into your change, seeing a Roosevelt dime, and spending it without a second thought. Now imagine that dime carries a 1956 date and a tiny D mint mark. Most people would never stop. A serious collector absolutely would. And before you let one leave your hand, there are details you need to see. The 1956 D Roosevelt dime came from a very different America. The country was moving deeper into the post-war era. Consumer spending was expanding, and American industry was transforming everyday life. This dime was part of a silver coinage system that would eventually disappear. Roosevelt dimes from 1946 through 1964 were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, before the series changed to copper-nickel clad beginning in 1965. And there is a story behind the portrait staring back at you. The obverse shows Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left, with liberty along the left side, in God we trust below, and the date 1956 at the bottom. Turn it over and you see a torch at the center, with an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right. Around the design are United States of America, E pluribus unum, and O-N-E dime. The D mint mark identifies Denver production. Now feel the coin. This silver Roosevelt dime weighs approximately 2.50 grams, measures about 17.90 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. Its thickness is roughly 1.35 millimeters. Under the surface, you're holding an alloy of 90% silver and 10% copper. Those numbers may sound technical, but they tell you something powerful. This isn't just an old dime. It's a surviving piece of America's silver money era. But here's the trap. A 1956 with D. Roosevelt dime is not automatically rare simply because it is old. More than 108 million were struck at Denver, and PCGS notes that circulated examples are generally common. The real collector pressure appears when condition becomes exceptional, especially at very high grades and with full bands characteristics. So if you're holding one in fine condition, don't invent an error or assume every example is a fortune. The coin's exact identity and condition still matter. That doesn't make your search pointless. Quite the opposite. It makes the inspection more important. Start with the date. Then find that tiny D beneath the date. Study Roosevelt's portrait, the lettering, the torch, the branches, and the fields. Look at the surfaces under good light. Natural toning, dark areas, and an aged silver appearance can be part of the coin's original character. Never clean it. Don't polish away the history. A shiny coin isn't automatically a better coin. This is where people make the mistake that cannot be undone. They find an old silver dime, grab a cloth, and start rubbing. They use chemicals because they want the coin to look new. Don't do it. Original toning matters, and an altered surface can permanently hurt collector appeal. If the coin appears unusually strong or potentially important, professional grading is critical. Let an expert evaluate what you actually have instead of trying to improve it yourself. Collectors also obsess over tiny details that casual owners never notice. They want the correct date and mint mark. They examine the strike. They look at the condition of the lettering and the central design. On high-grade Roosevelt dimes, the separation of the bands on the torch can become especially important to specialists. That's why two coins carrying exactly the same date and mint mark can have dramatically different collector appeal. Now think about what happened to these coins after 1956. They entered ordinary commerce. People spent them at stores, carried them in pockets, dropped them, mixed them with other change, and eventually forgot about them. Some were saved, others disappeared. Some were damaged beyond serious collector interest. And as surviving original examples move into collections, they become less likely to return to circulation. Supply shrinks while collectors keep searching. For the specific 1956 with D. Roosevelt dime described in this video in fine condition, the provided current market value is $141,000. That is the market figure supplied for this specific coin profile. It should not be interpreted as saying every 1956 with D dime is worth $141,000. Established market references show that ordinary circulated 1956 with D examples are common, while exceptional condition can create much greater scarcity. So if you find a 1956 with D dime, don't rush. Don't spend it before checking it. Don't clean it. Don't scrape the surface. Don't assume its age guarantees a huge payday either. Look at the date, the D mint mark, the original surface, the condition, and the overall design. If the coin looks promising, protect it and consider professional grading. Patience is one of the most valuable habits in collecting because once you damage an original surface, you cannot simply put it back. And think about the opportunity hiding inside that tiny piece of silver. 10 cents was the denomination. But the historical journey is priceless in a completely different way. This coin connects you to post-war America, to the final decades of circulating U.S. silver, and to a Roosevelt dime design that has remained one of the most recognizable in American coinage. This is why you should look twice. A coin doesn't need to look spectacular to deserve your attention. Sometimes the treasure is the one sitting quietly beneath ordinary change. Sometimes the person who finds it isn't a professional collector at all, they're simply the person who decided to check before spending it. That could be you. So remember the date. Remember the D mint mark. Protect the original surface. And never clean the coin. Do not spend this coin until you know what you're holding. The specific example we've been discussing carries a stated market figure of $141,000, and whether you're a seasoned collector or someone who just found an old dime, the lesson is simple. Slow down before you spend history. A tiny silver coin can carry an enormous story and sometimes serious money. And now we've reached the end of our four-coin hunt. We've seen a 1970 Washington quarter, a 1944 wheat penny, a 1946 Jefferson nickel, and this 1956 with D. Roosevelt dime. Different denominations, different eras, different stories, but one powerful lesson connects them all. Ordinary-looking coins deserve a second look before they disappear back into circulation. The biggest mistake isn't failing to find a rare coin. It's finding something important and spending it because you never check. That's why you should inspect your old change. Learn the dates and mint marks. Protect original surfaces. And never clean a potentially valuable coin. Professional grading can make a critical difference when serious money is involved. So tonight, before you empty the change jar, before you toss those old coins into a machine, and before you spend another weathered penny, nickel, dime, or quarter, look again. You never know when hidden wealth is sitting in plain sight. And the next coin you check could be the one that changes everything.